All right, I got this email from our friends at Wyvern Creations. Dave sent me this email along with everybody else, right? And in this email, it says, hey, look, we got the new Ravin R470 now in stock. Look at this email. It's pretty exciting. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. That looks like an R500, doesn't it? Just says 470 on the side. You're not fooling me. But anyway, R470 Stealth Gray in stock, ready to ship. It's actually out here. Ravin has stumbled a little bit here in the past, recently, in the recent years, haven't they? Ever since COVID, Ravin may be now getting back on track with this crossbow we're going to see. Remember the R500 came out, COVID made the parts difficult to get or made working on the crossbows and building the crossbows difficult, I don't know. But nonetheless, they ended up having problems with that. It was delayed in its release, and then when they released it, they had a recall, all these problems with the R500. Since then, they've done the thing where you can pre-order their crossbows, you pay the money up front. I'm not a big fan of that. I'll give you money for a crossbow when you give me a crossbow. How about that? That's worked for me my entire crossbow hunting career. It's worked for me across the board in my life. I'm going to stick to that kind of plan, not paying for stuff that I don't get. How about that? But anyway, this is in stock and ready to ship. You give them the money, they'll ship you one. That's pretty cool. And camo and electric crank models coming next week. All right, well, let's check out this crossbow. RavinCrossbows.com. That's a pretty good name for a website. I like crossbow companies who hold themselves out as crossbow companies, right? Ravin Crossbows. It's in the name. Right? Okay, join the Ravin Nation. Here we got a guy who is not ashamed to walk around with a crossbow. He's carrying that bad boy. That looks like an old R10X. It looks like, I can see that on here. It's a little bit longer, right, than what we're going to see here. Join the Ravin Nation. I am a member of the Ravin Nation. Did you know that? Check this out. I'm a member of the Ravin Nation. Ooh. Well, not really. But I have a Ravin R29X. This is the black... Okay, the Black Widow, right? Had some issues with this crossbow. It's a little bit more crossbow than I'm comfortable with. The cats like it. The cats like to rub up against it and leave cat hair all over it. This is a problem in this house with cats, isn't it? It is what it is. But we all have our challenges, our crossbow-related challenges, and mine is cat-related, apparently. But this crossbow also has presented other challenges. When I get time, I'm going to spend some time. People keep asking me,
when are you going to shoot the Ravin? When are you going to get the...
We're getting there, right? I got lots of stuff going on. I work for a living, for one thing. And then in addition to that, I make these videos. But I also have a Manitoba Bear trip coming up at the time that I'm making this, getting ready to go for that. So I got all my time, you got limited number of eggs and a lot of baskets, right? Got to put your eggs in the right baskets. Here, we can get rid of this, sign up and get 10% off accessories on your first order. That's pretty cool. I think I'm already on this, to be honest with you. But we have Ravin crossbows. And it starts right out with crossbows. Unlike some of the other websites we've looked at for these crossbow manufacturers, Ravin proud to show themselves off as crossbow manufacturers. So they are putting the crossbows first. At Ravin, we do things the hard way, but the right way. I don't know what that means. Accuracy not only sets us apart, but it makes us who we are. I love it. Nothing has stopped us from living up to that philosophy since day one. Never settle, never compromise, never surrender. Pure quality, pure craft. In every crossbow, it's what we do, and we take extreme pride in delivering it. Buy the best crossbow out there, buy Ravin Crossbows. Well, let us be the judge of that, Ravin. Kind of full of yourself there, aren't you? I'm just kidding. But anyway, here, if we look at their website, we have the Ravin LR that we have already looked at. And it's a pretty interesting looking crossbow. If we look at it, kind of a combination of other models for Ravin. Did a video on this, but it has a rail that runs the entire length. The scope rail runs the entire length of the rail, similar to the way the R29X does. So what we have is supported here by the buttstock. It's supported up here up front. You pick this up. This is a good, heavy, dense piece of equipment. It is made out of some really good, solid stuff. Stock is all synthetic, but that's fine. I mean, it feels dense and secured and everything else. And this is all aluminum, I think. So it's like really, really solid construction. Okay, so hopefully we're going to see the same thing in what we look at today. The Ravin R470, another new one, the Ravin R470 XK7. These are numbers that mean something to somebody else. 470, we can assume, means the speed, right? The speed of the crossbow. We also have the E I think that is your electronic cranking system. And if you look right here, we can see on the buttstock a little battery pack or a motor or something that is going to help us electronically crank that crossbow. Pretty cool. This is interesting technology. I'm not saying I want one. I'm not saying you want one. I'm saying it's interesting to see crossbow companies innovate, to come up with ideas and test them out in the market. If they work. But they put together these ideas and get them out there, and sometimes they take root, sometimes we never see them again, right? The double limb Excalibur thing comes to mind. I mean, that's one that they're, ooh, we got 2 shots, and nobody wants 2 shots. They're hit and miss. There's a market for some things and not others, and let the market decide. This is one, we'll see, time will tell whether the electronic cranking model is important to people. Crossbow consumers seem to be okay with cranks. Not a big fan of cranks. I really like to rope cock my crossbows, but as speeds increase and draw weights increase, cranks became more the norm, right? And I will say, on the Ravin R29X, this cranking system I love, right? Not a big fan of the cranks you got to go put on. I always make fun of Genevieve on her crossbow. Put the little glove on, the little wrist strap, and then you have to go find your crank handle, and you got to mount the crank on here and run the little cables down, and then you spend your time cranking it. And when you're done, and she's real quick with this because she does it all the time, but then when you're done, you take it all apart and you put all that down, then you take a shot in the backyard, then you have to do all that all over again. Whereas I grew up as a crossbow hunter with the OB, right? With the OB, a 2010 Excalibur Axiom, and that thing I can rope cock in my sleep. And if I don't like the way I cocked it, if it didn't feel quite right, I can just uncock it and cock it again. And it takes 2 seconds and it doesn't hurt my back. And I put the rope right in my pocket for next time, and I'm ready to go. Cranks, not so much, right? It's a separate piece of equipment. I'm not a big fan of that. But when you've got them built in, like we see on this crossbow, very interesting. Let's pick one of these bad boys up. Now, here's the R29X, awarded Best of 2024. That, keep in mind, people have talked about that and how great that is. This is a good crossbow, the R29X. I'm not taking anything away from it. I really do like it, okay? It's just a different architecture, a different lifestyle, It's a different platform, and it requires me to have different arrows. It requires me to have a different cranking method, and there's just a lot that I would have to get my head around before I made that my main crossbow. It's more of a thing that I'm using in a backyard and using it to make videos for you. That's the reason I have it. And it'll serve that purpose. It'll serve that purpose perfectly. Best of 2024, that is probably referring to an Outdoor Life article, and those articles are notorious for picking the people that advertise the most with Outdoor Life or with whatever media that is, whether it's a magazine or a website or what have you. They really don't pick outside of that. So Best of 2024, I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't put much stock in that. I would put a lot more stock in. I put a lot more stock for Ravin's sake in their history of making crossbows and pushing crossbow technology forward. Ravin made 400 feet per second the norm. So my hat goes off to them for that. They've pushed other manufacturers, challenged other manufacturers to keep up with them. And that's important. That's what these companies should be doing. So not just speed, but in other technology like these cranks we're talking about. Let's look at that R470. We're going to look at the basic model, right? And kaboom, we'll click on that. And ooh, it does look like an R500. It's probably just a backed off R500. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe it is nothing more. Now we have a regular scope on here, a vintage scope. I'm such a scope snob. I do like the range finding scopes, in particular the Burris Oracle X. Take a look at that Certus here. If we can get our hands on that bad boy, we're going to have a video on that. I can't wait. One way or another, if they release that scope, we're going to have a video on it because I'm very interested in that scope. These range finding scopes all are different, right? We're seeing different technology coming out there at different price points and different options. And I still did a video on that. Love my Burris Oracle X that will be accompanying me once again to Manitoba. Based on my experience with those range finding scopes, I hope crossbows generally move away from these speed ring scopes into a new era of range finding scopes that are affordable for everybody. That's what I'm hoping we are getting toward. And competition, just like it does with crossbows, it will do the same thing with scopes and make that technology available to all of us, right? That's what I'm hoping to do. This is a crank model right there. We're going to latch our little handle on there and crank this bad boy back. I think this is, good Lord, there's a lot of gadgetry on this. I thought this was a lever at first. It is not. These are not levers, these are support systems to support this architecture right here above the arrow, above the rail. So as that arrow is going down the rail and leaving the crossbow, what we have is it fully enclosed by this extra rail. Seems like that's a safety feature. They've got this whole arrow enclosed inside this sort of cage, right? You don't need that. I mean, it's not like a Ravin arrow ever blows up on you. There goes that. Okay. So this is the refurbished R29X. Before, that's why I call it the Black Widow, is because it's like, it's gonna kill me. You know what I mean? That's my mind, right? I'm not saying anything bad about this crossbow. I really love it, but it's a lot of crossbow. It's just a lot of crossbow. But I do love how this goes down. This does not have that cage, right? This one that we're looking at, this R470, does have a crank system very similar, I'm betting. And I think a Burris Oracle X would fit on here perfectly, work on here, no problem. You have that full support all the way down the rail, just like the R29X. You're gonna have no problem putting the scope of your choosing on here. I'm gonna make this a little bit smaller so we get it all on the screen. How about that? Now, if we scroll down a little bit and look at this bad boy, it does look just like the R500. It's backed off a little bit. They probably don't have the draw weight of the R500, a little bit less stress on those limbs, eliminating some of the problems they might have had with the R500. I'm just spitballing here, I don't know that, but that kind of makes sense to me that they would do that. And this might be the right sort of sweet spot for this design of crossbow, who knows. One thing we see about Ravins, notice here with a field point on the end, it just protrudes, the arrow shaft protrudes beyond the end of the riser, and the field point extends out between these bumpers. The minute you put a broadhead on here, what happens? It now protrudes way out into this space. It'll stick right out here. My 3-inch Swhacker will stick out clear to here. And there's no setting this crossbow down on its nose in a blind or at the base of your tree stand or anywhere else for that matter. I don't think I'd feel comfortable. I don't think you can shorten the arrow like I did on the Killer Instinct SWAT X1, because I think it would draw back in here and have contact with the riser the minute you put a broadhead on there. Not what you're going to want to do. You're going to want to stick with their length of arrow. Now with Ravin, we know from experience, but also from reading about it, that Ravin wants you to use their arrows. Don't be experimenting with other arrows. I might end up doing that down the road just because I do that. I experiment with arrows, I do that. But I'm doing it at my own risk, and when the R29X blew up because I was using different arrows, that's on me. It's not on Ravin, it's on me. But I don't really personally care for that because of that design. Now on this one, I have an aftermarket job, okay, an aftermarket job. This is a stirrup hanger. It's a rest for shooting off a table or a bench. This is a fantastic add-on from Backyard Broadheads. He is a friend of Bunjie. Friend of Bunjie Jim puts these together, sells them on his website. Check them out, you Ravin fanboys, you Ravin aficionados. Go get one of these things. I love it because every time I'm setting this down, you can't see it here, but every time I set this bad boy down, kaboom, I set it down and I'm done with it, right? I don't have to worry about it. It's not going to fall over. In fact, it's probably the best stirrup setup, the best stand setup I've seen on the crossbows that I've used. Most of them I end up leaning up against me or leaning up against the edge of the blind or leaning up against a tree when I'm at the bottom of the tree stand. It stands up pretty much anywhere and it's fixed, so it's not going to fold up and out of your way or anything, but it doesn't get in the way. It's just a neat little addition, so check those out. And there's other Ravin accessories, decocking tools. He has other accessories as well. This is the cocked position, of course. This is a shorter crossbow than the R10X that we know and love. That is a classic from Ravin. This has probably an adjustable buttstock. Who knows? We'll see what we got here. This design right here, I'm not so big on, though. When we look at this, this really does look like an R500 that they just put a different sticker on. And the sticker is pretty unusual. We've got the typical Ravin font here, but it looks like almost an afterthought, the sticker. It's like, just run off some stickers and stick it on there, because it's white on a black crossbow and it stands right out. Like, what's wrong with gray? Something that's a little bit more hidden, a little bit more secret, right? So let's look at some specs. We've got speed, 400 grain arrow. I love it, Ravin and a 400 grain arrow. And another thing I'm going to tell you about Ravin, I promise you, without even shooting this bad boy, you are going to get 470 feet per second or more with a 400 grain arrow out of this crossbow. That's awesome. Again, hats off to Ravin. I give credit where credit is due on these things, right? I'm not a Ravin fanboy. I have a Ravin, whatever, and I'm impressed with a lot of their stuff, but I'll be critical about what I don't like, as I have been in this video. But when I'm critical of something, it comes from a place in me that says, look, you can do better, right? That's why I'm being critical of these companies. I'm calling them out on stuff so we can improve that. We should all do that, right? We shouldn't be so in love with a brand that we just accept anything that they sell, right? That's bad for us, and it's bad for crossbows. And I write about that in my book, The Death by Bunjie Crossbow Method. I love that, right? I love that idea. So check that out. But the speed with a 400 grain arrow, Ravin's reputation over the last, since 2015 or what have you, is that you will get the advertised speed with their crossbows. That's awesome. We've got 196 foot-pounds of kinetic energy. Do we? Do we really? We can go to Death by Bunjie and click on calculators. And when we do that, we get the joint calculators made by Death by Bunjie and Old Grumpy Hunter. And we can look at these things, and we can go right here. Actually, we can say, we got the speed of 470, kaboom, and we've got the 400 grainer on there. We can calculate KE and P. Gary's a stickler for everything being just right. You know, he calls it P, but P doesn't stand for momentum. It stands for like persistence or something like that. But it is the official abbreviation, but I would put MO, M-O for momentum, or MOM. Something. But anyway, we click on that button, we calculate, and we get 196 foot-pounds, and we look over here, 196 foot-pounds. Thank you, Ravin. They must have used our calculators. When we go back on here, though, what I like to see here is kaboom, 0.834 slugs. Out of the box. You can buy this crossbow, you can put the arrows that came with it, shoot something, and you're shooting through a car door with 0.834 slugs of momentum. What more do you want, right? Right? What more do you want? That's fantastic. It really is. So these numbers down here, Gary and I got to have a conversation because this, I think, is BS. This is old school BS. I think it is malpractice to go and shoot an elk with 42 to 65 foot-pounds of kinetic energy. I think that is obscene, and people should not be doing that in 2025. No way, right? Going to bear hunt in Manitoba, no less than 0.7 slugs of momentum. Kaboom. That's all that is acceptable. Anything less is unacceptable. And that is a Death by Bunjie axiom. How about that? So, 470, 400 grain arrow. We got all the energy we want out of this crossbow. I love it. If we go back here and look, we can scroll down. We can actually do a more robust calculation of energy and generate that over distance right here. This is the complex arrow ballistic calculator. We've got a 470 initial speed and a 400 grain arrow right there. We're going to assume vein length and all that stuff. That makes some difference, but we're not going to worry about that as too much at this point. It'll still give us pretty good numbers. Again, we're starting out at 0.834 slugs of momentum. But when we look at, and we go out to 120 yards, we're still at 0.705. We're in the 0.7 slugs of momentum, even at 120 yards. Momentum that satisfies the rule of 400 at 120 yards out of the box. That's pretty cool. It's 8.4 pounds. It's on the heavy side, but that cage adds some weight. It is an aluminum construction, I'm betting, adds some weight. It is one where they saved the weight they could on the stock, that kind of thing, with synthetic materials, but you really have to have a strong, well put together crossbow if you're going to be shooting these speeds in 2025, and that's what they've done, I'm betting. 26.75 inches, or 26 3/4 inches, as I like to say, in length. Draw force is 17 pounds. That's a lot for a crank, right? When cranks first came around, they're 10, 12 pounds. All of a sudden now they're 17 pounds, right? So 17 pounds, there's a lot of stress on these limbs, an awful lot. It has the hex coil cam system, fiberglass limbs, a composite material, and on the stock, an aluminum riser and all that good stuff. So looking over here, if we look through here, see if they're, yeah, these are 300 degrees. They have some other cams that rotate beyond that, but the hex coil cam system is rotating 300 degrees. You pull the trigger and those cams will, they're generating more energy and more speed by through the cams. So it's not just the stress of the limbs. It's not just the power stroke, how far you pull those limbs back and how far that arrow has to travel attached to the string. It's also the speeding up of that string when you pull the trigger. Pretty cool stuff. That's all compound crossbows. Has a silent, effortless cocking system. They really have improved their cocking systems. I will say that. They used to have clicking cocking systems because you could hear the gears, and that gave you the peace of mind that, hey, it's latching, right? It's not just going to spin out of control. These don't do that now. They're really getting around that where you don't have to worry about that. And that scope that we looked at comes with a 100-yard illuminated 550 feet per second scope, 3.003 arrows, removable draw handle, and quiver mounting bracket. Pretty cool. So the arrows, Ravin does ship a lot of .003s. People like them. They like them. I don't hear generally bad things about Ravin arrows, and the .003s seem to be just as accurate as the .001s. They ship with those, and Ravin hasn't really deviated from that. You can buy the higher end arrows, but I don't know that you need to really. I would get it and see what you want to do. But buy a dozen of the .003s or buy a dozen of the .001s. Don't be, you don't want some 003s and some ones. We're talking about straightness here. And you really want your arrows to be as similar as possible, whether it's through spine indexing like I talked about before. Definitely the same length, same weight, same tip, same vanes, all that stuff should be, the knock, very important. Do not be deviating from your manufacturer's nocks, really. That's just a recipe for disaster. That's the easiest way to have problems, I think, with your crossbow. But a 100-yard illuminated 550 feet per second scope, you're going to set it up for your crossbow, but that just means that down the road they could use this scope on faster crossbows as those faster crossbows become available. But a 100-yard reticle, that ought to be enough for us, right, in this day and age. With the range-finding scope like the Burris, at least that range-finding scope, the Burris Oracle X, I can shoot 120 yards, I think, even with that old slow crossbow if I zoom out all the way. You're not limited by reticles or anything like that when you have that precise dot. You are limited in scopes like that with how much room for view you have, okay? So even on that old crossbow, I can do 120 yards, I think, if I zoom out all the way with a 563 grain arrow. If I make the arrow lighter, the speed increases, and I might even be able to go out to 150 yards with that scope. With this crossbow, if I put a Burris on this, right, on the R29X, I'm betting I can go 200 yards easy in the field of view and get a dot, and I do not trust my accuracy shooting out to 200 yards or anything, at least not at this time, but it can be done, right, with those scopes. So you're interesting. I'm just throwing that out there. This scope is probably going to get the job done. Ravin wouldn't put it on here if it wasn't going to get the job done. But there's other options out there, right? And I'd like to talk about that and make sure people understand kind of the limitations of this versus another thing. That's what we're talking about here. Pretty cool. Now, these are getting ready to ship. So some people actually have these in their hands, I'm betting. If you get one of these, hit me up, leave a comment, leave a message. Let's talk about this crossbow. Let me know what you think about the Ravin R470, right? Pretty neat. Until next time, all hail Bunjie.